There's a new way to stay connected and know what's happening with Market to Market when you subscribe to Market Insider. One email and a lot of information awaits you. Go to markettomarket.org and subscribe to Market Insider. Welcome into the MTOM podcast. I'm Paul Yeager. This is the second part of the book with the author Brian Reisinger, Land Rich, Cash Poor, as we talk about his family's hope in the untold story of the disappearing American farmer. You already heard us discuss in great detail about some of his history. We've kind of talked a little bit about some possible solutions, but this episode is going to be solely focused on what happened at COVID, what accelerated, what changed, and how rural America and agriculture can navigate the changing world using a little bit of Wisconsin as a blueprint and what they have done over the years. So we'll kind of dip in a little bit about Brian's family. And then at the end of this episode, we're going to have a fun news segment with Julie Knutson. She's going to explain and walk us through a segment as we kind of peel back the curtain of what it takes to put on the Market to Market TV show. That is what we have in store for you in this installment of the M2M podcast, which is a production of the Market to Market TV show. Let's pick up part 2 of our conversation with Brian. Let's get to COVID, because that changed us, and now I want to talk about the future as well. I say, and I know I'm not alone in this, I say it often in our office, COVID accelerated a lot of things that were already happening in this country. They brought issues to light faster than where we were headed. In a way, that was good because we all understood it, as opposed to, oh, you know what, that is the truth. Your family, let's talk specifically. What changed for COVID for you? Your dad was gravely ill, 2 hospital stints. So that was personal, absolutely, but it also changed your farm.
It did. You're so right. I think about COVID as a massive stress test to our food system. You know, it showed us where the strength is. It showed us where the weaknesses are. And so for us, as you said, my dad, he got the case of COVID that wasn't the sniffles or wasn't kind of a thing that passes and is less serious for the next person or whatever. He got a very severe case. And so whatever people think about how COVID was handled and whatever people think about that issue overall, it was one that we had to live with very seriously. He was in the back of an ambulance. I remember talking to him on the phone, and we tell that story in the book. And he was laid up for a couple of weeks. And my sister, who's been working to take over the farm, she grabbed the reins. And, you know, I'll say to the day I die, she saved our farm. And what we were living through at that time is we were living the situation where prices were down. Why? Because, you know, goods couldn't move through the supply chain, right? And we had that situation that farmers and consumers were living this kind of dystopian thing, whether everyone realized what was happening to everyone or not. We had food that was not on the grocery store shelves, or if it was more expensive. And we had farmers who were trying desperately to sell their goods. And if they could, often the price was lower. Why is that? Because our supply chain had locked up. We have such an integrated supply chain these days that one big distribution center going down can affect the supply of food. It locks up that supply chain. Farmer can't sell what he could normally sell. Consumer can't buy what they normally would buy. And so you're so right that COVID unveiled that. And, you know, for our farm, we dealt with my sister carrying things on without my dad for a time and the uncertainty of, is he going to come back? We also dealt with workforce issues. There were challenges getting the kind of help that we needed in that time. So we dealt with so many of those dilemmas on the ground, while at the same time, the broad food system was dealing with that shock to the system. I think you're right. It shows us, you know, many of the things that we need to figure out a way to address, because they were coming and they continue to come. And, you know, there are other disruptions to our food supply, whether it's bird flu, whether it's invasive pests, whether it's weather, whether it's global conflict. We need to figure out a way to have a food system that has some more of that resilience built back into it.
Yeah, let's see if I can get this right, because given what you just said, I think the first sentence is COVID accelerated a lot of things. You've talked about it. It's in the book. We'll talk about it here in a moment, that there's only 4 companies or 3 companies or choke points, whether it's the Bay in Long Beach or the Bay, you know, in South Carolina or Maryland or wherever it is, those 3 choke points. This is exposing and allowing us and forcing us to address those situations, at the same time opening the door for your family farm to be part of the solution.
I think so. You know, we can't blow up and destroy our current food system, and nor should we. It provides food in all corners of the country. It's a modern miracle in many ways, but it has these deep vulnerabilities. And I think therein lies the solution for everyone. Farms like ours that have gotten harder and harder to achieve scale, but we're still here. Finding a way for farms like ours to be able to have a full-time income again on feeding this country can not only create new entrepreneurial opportunity for farms like ours, but also it can create more opportunities for consumers, and it can give us a supply chain that just has more paths through it, and some of them are national and international. Some of them are local and regional. Some of them are more specialty. Some of them are more commodity based. We can have a world where we pursue all of these things. And I think we need to. I think COVID showed that we have to do that. But the good part is there's economic opportunity in there if we do it right.
It's like the way market is set up, where we have different analysts each week. It is a different source of looking at some of the same things in a different take. Our food system is similar in the sense of we do need different sources. We might know we get avocados from Mexico, or whatever the commercials say, or Wisconsin was America's dairy land, and happy cows raise happy milk, and we buy into regionalization, and that is an absolute thing that I think agriculture can lean into and say Minnesota does this well, Illinois does this well. Be proud of what we grow here in Missouri with peaches. We have some of that infrastructure built. How do we best build upon that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In Wisconsin, it's the Master Cheesemaker program, right? We went from being number one in milk production to no longer being that, but we could continue to make the best cheese and have that be our niche. So finding more and more of those niches. And I think there's a number of policy changes and other just shifts in terms of how we operate our economy. One is that we need to have a research and development revolution in this country. Our research and development spending by the government is at its lowest level since the 1970s. And whether it's by the government or whether it's by the private sector or private funding in universities, most of it is focused in agriculture. Most of it's focused on how do we continue to achieve that scale. We need to have more research and development. We need to have more of it be what's called scale neutral, where farms of all sizes, not only large, but also medium and small, can adopt it. They do what my dad would call penciling out, where he can say, well, I buy that and over 5 years, it gives me efficiency to pay it off, right? Yeah. So we need to be able to do that. And there are examples of that. AI, there are types of AI technology that can be scale neutral. There are types of gene editing that can be scale neutral. And these are things that could lead to new practices, new crops, new generations of farming done in more parts of the country that can meet one of those regional market needs. Find more ways for there to be new opportunities for farmers that can meet new needs in the market as we focus on more and more local and regional. We also have to make sure that we have fair trade and that we have fair practices in our domestic economy, and that we're making sure that the farmer has a fair shot. If we're doing those things and our consumers are focused on where their food comes from, which people care more than ever where their food comes from, and the consumer is helping to create more of that broader based market demand, we have resilient farm families, and we have the American entrepreneurial system that will shift to meet those needs. So I think more R&D and innovation, the right government policies, and harnessing that consumer demand, if it can continue to grow, can really be parts of the solution. Okay.
You can't answer three parts like that and allow me to just let that go. We just had an election where the voter, every op-ed or every obit about the election says it was a pocketbook issue. You and I both know food that's grown locally, when you go to the farmer's market, buying that tomato, that's more of a commodity, than buying that pepper or whatever is rare to your area is going to cost me more than it is at my grocery store. And people said that was important to them. So how do you convince someone that, yes, spending 8%, 12% more for some of that produce that I know where it was grown and can drive by it is more important to pay than saving my family 20% at the grocery store?
It's a great question. We got to ask ourselves those hard questions if we're going to work through these situations, right? So here's the reality. The current food system we have, although it's a modern miracle and has delivered affordable food for a long time, it really isn't as affordable as it once was. In some cases, it's not more affordable than what you can find as far as local or regional options. It depends. But, the cost of food has gone up so much faster than the rate of inflation. And the reasons for that include the disruptions to our supply chain that happen so easily and regularly now. And it also includes the fact that you can't hammer an industry like we have American farming and expect the innovation and productivity to continue to go up at the same pace. So we've got real structural problems with the price of food that are going to persist and continue to get worse, and in some cases already make our traditional food sources not more affordable what people can find. The problem that we have is that in most places it's a false choice. People either have, local grocery store where they can get their food, or a farmer's market that's kind of rare and is way more expensive. We need more local and regional options to address the vulnerabilities of our food supply, and by becoming more plentiful, bring that price down. And what we are seeing on the one hand, that traditional food system is facing some of those vulnerabilities, driving that cost of food up. We're also seeing more farmers markets, more specialty food stores, more types of local and regional food economy growing in certain places. And so it's true that in some places, in some types of food, you can get something about as affordable through a local food source. And there's also grocers who are willing to have local food options if they know that their consumers will buy it. And so if we move in this direction, we all take baby steps. I tell people you don't have to throw out the way you grocery shop now and go for the way more expensive option in every single case, but try to diversify it a little bit. You might go to your local grocery store, stop at your local butcher shop, or off at a farmer's market for something that is affordable down the street as well.
But let's use Madison as an example, in a community that's very progressive thinking and living, and they would probably get that. But if you go to a community maybe 30 minutes out, 20 minutes out, that is not going to be the same sentiment. Because they have to factor in their gas to get into town to get that.
Yep.
They're not going to be as willing, even though they might be closer to where that farm is. So there's still a divide there that has to be overcome. And I don't know if it's as easy as what you and I are proposing here.
It's certainly not as easy as I hope it would be.
Maybe that's better. Hope is better than...
Yeah. You're right. And I live that reality. We're about 45 minutes from Madison, and, where I'm from, you don't go into the farmer's market in Madison to buy your groceries. It's a ways away. And, but the reality is we don't have a local grocery store there anymore either, So I think what we need that demand to be met by a more robust local food economy. There are small towns where farmers markets are sprouting up. We need farmers who are willing to take a little bit of a gamble on, putting a little bit of acreage toward a food product that can maybe be sold locally. We need consumers who are willing to buy their food from more places. It's absolutely a persuading of hearts and minds. And to your point, it ironically gets a little more difficult as you get out into rural areas, because that option isn't readily available. And
it's no different than your mom or your dad and your sister when they were trying to find they had to find a market for their dairy cows when they were getting ready to liquidate the herd. I lost your video again. Darn it. Okay. It's a lot like your sister and your dad when they were trying to find the outlet for their cattle. They wanted to find the best fair price. So in that sense, if I'm growing food versus a commodity, I have to do some of the work to find my own market or find my own outlet and buyer. That's also that's a little bit of responsibility on the grower too. It's not just all on the consumer here.
That's right. We have to be willing to branch out and take those risks and try to find that market, whether it's marketing online, whether it's word of mouth locally, probably a little bit of all of these things. We have to be willing to do a little bit of that. We also have to have, if the consumer and the farmer are getting a little closer together and everyone's inching toward one another, we also have to have infrastructure grow up around that, right? I mean, there's a lot of farmers in the Midwest who know where to take their grain to the local grain elevator, but they don't have anywhere to go with specialty wheat or artisan tomatoes. And so we do need to have some of that food infrastructure also grow up. And some of that might be existing companies that decide they want to do business with small farms and work in local regional markets because they care about resiliency. They know that's a smart thing for them long-term business-wise. Or it could be additional small businesses that grow up and make our supply chain a little bit more diverse.
And I've had that conversation with people who grow pulse crops, and I'm like, well, what's your outlet? It's like, well, we have a pet food factory nearby. I mean, it's those factories have to find, and they have to convince 20 farmers to grow something that will go into their factory. It's like the organic discussion. You have to be able to, I know of a young farmer who's like, we are struggling because my organic crop, I don't have an outlet for it. And so you just have to be able to make sure that you can find a place to take that crop when the time comes. And that's a little bit of responsibility. Sorry, that's just a tangent. My question, though, Brian, is cheap food. I long have had a relative tell me over the years everybody just wants cheap food. I think, help me if I get my numbers right, pre-COVID, we were at 10% of our spending for our food. Now we're at 15% post-COVID, post-inflation issues. Still some of the lowest in the world, but you can't tell everybody that, or they still think it's too expensive.
Yep. And that's where it's a little bit of leap of faith for people. What I say to people is, hey, the food isn't more affordable now. Does it feel affordable anymore? And it doesn't. And you say one of the solutions is diversify how you buy what you buy. And maybe you'll pay a little more over here and a little bit less over here, but change that mix, because it can create new entrepreneur opportunity for our farmers. And if we can do that, we can begin to address the structural reasons food is so expensive.
And like in COVID, you mentioned the local meat facility. That was actually one of the solutions. Remember all the stories of Iowa did it, and I think Wisconsin did it too, and a couple of other states. They put money into local meat processing facilities, ones that only would maybe accept 2 cows a day, were accepting 20 because they were able to expand. They were able to find the employees to do it. We have to make sure those lockers, the meat lockers, can stay afloat. And that's just one little link in this chain.
Yeah. And that's what's so hard about this is we're all jumping into the water at the same time. The farmer, the consumer, the agribusiness, the food company, the government, we all need to have faith in this idea that we can build a more resilient supply chain. And for me, it is the thing that can solve this crisis of the disappearing American farmer, which is so crucial. And I just think that helping people understand how these things are all connected, it's challenging, but it's true. So, there's benefit to that.
Is the town that you're closest to Sauk? Is that how you pronounce it?
Good guess. Very close. It is Sauk. That's how you pronounce it. We're about 10, 15 miles from there. We happen to be a little closer to the village of Plain, 5 minutes away. But
okay,
you're talking about our region.
So Plain, Sauk, Jessup, wherever that small town is. How do I improve my hometown if I'm watching this, hoping that the government kind of helps, private industry kind of helps. I can do some things on my own. Where's the magic part here as we move into this new era of politics that we'll have with new Congress, new president? There's some opportunities here to have some discussions that could really change some lives. How do we do this rural, urban, let's get together and help everyone?
Absolutely. Explore your food sources and ask that question, how can I create new entrepreneur opportunity for our farmers? And what that translates into is maybe you got one grocery store in the area. You ask them, will they carry some local options? Do they have anything that they carry from local farmers? If there is a local butcher shop, go there. If you got a farmer down the road that sells halves of beef, consider doing it that way. If there is a fruit stand or there's an actual farmer's market that gathers, go buy some of your food there. Take whatever step you can in your area. I mean, some people don't have a farmer's market in their area. Some people don't have any local grocery store. There's just one large chain. Go there and ask that grocer if they're willing to carry some local options. Just explore what's around you and try to just take a step where you can. Even if it's a small one, if we all took a version of that step, it would be, nationwide demand if everyone did it, so it's worth it.
Our communities also need, you mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit and it's heavy on food, but we also need businesses and we need to have policy that encourages entrepreneurship. Do you want to step out of food policy and debate about, we got to find some manufacturing in some places, or we have to use that technology that can be used on the farm, or, what else are small towns going to have to do here? How can we help them?
Absolutely. It is part of a broader tapestry of things. And here's some of the good news. Another silver lining of COVID is that people realize they can live anywhere for certain types of work. And so you do have, and a lot of people wanted to move back to rural areas. So you have certain rural areas that are growing in population. That means more people, more money, more ideas, more customers. And so there's an opportunity for some of our rural communities to have a resurgence. I think we do need to have government policy that allows for small businesses to be able to fair shot in this country. A lot of people don't realize, although people who live in rural areas, live this, that, rural areas are far more likely to have self-employed folks, individual small business owners. Some rural counties, there was one study showed they're 9 times more likely to have someone who's self-employed than an urban county. The reason for this is in cities and suburbs, there's good sized established companies that provide a lot of services. In rural areas, there's a lot of folks filling gaps. There's a lot of carpenters, plumbers, electricians, hairdressers, caregivers who are filling gaps where there isn't an established company to do it. So there's a lot of people that are working for themselves, independent contractors, small business owners, and they're working class folks, but they happen to write their own paycheck, rather than get their paycheck from an employer. So we need to have policies that are fair to Main Street as well, is another big part of this too.
And that has been addressed in some school and legislation for schools. I know a gal, school counselor, and she says in my community, and I know where it is that she grew up, they had two counselors in the school. It was, do you want to go work at the factory, or do you want to go to college? You go talk to, and then there was this, everybody needs to go to college. Now it's COVID exposed us that we need a lot more people doing factory and the plumbing and the electrical and the construction. Does that need to be a 50-50 balance?
You're so right. I think it needs to be much more of an all of the above situation rather than a false choice, and there are some kids who need to go to college, some kids who can go into the trades and have a perfectly good living, and it's noble work. It's good work, and I think we need to have a mix of encouraging kids to pursue college, pursue trade school, if they have an opportunity to do an apprenticeship, all of the above. And I would love to add one more thing to that list. I would love to have a bright on a future for our farms where our guidance counselors are telling their kids, hey, go into farming. That's the thing, is they don't hear that. I hear a lot of people say, well, none of young people want to farm anymore. I say, there's a lot of passionate kids in 4-H and FFA. They love the animals. They love what they're doing. Why aren't they farming? The reason they aren't farming is because they don't see the opportunity. They don't have any guidance counselors telling them that's a bright future. And even if they did have them telling them that, they know that there's no way for them to do it. Grandpa's farm is getting sold, or their family doesn't have land. How are they ever going to afford it? So if we can improve some of these problems, I think we can add going into farming onto that list for kids as well, because they're doing noble things. They're going into the trades, they're working in agriculture, they're going off to do something else. But more of them ought to be able to consider farming too.
I just had this conversation before we started to roll with someone, asking her background. She says, I'm one of 4. 3 brothers. There's no space for a 4th on that farm. Even to find a space for 3, I've had countless conversations with farmers. If you want to come home and be on this farm, Brian or Paul, you're going to have to figure out a way to make your own lane. So is that going to be, we're going to grow chickens, we're going to grow artisan tomatoes, you're going to market this, you're going to teaching that entrepreneurial. I don't have it, but I know that it can be taught to an extent. But it's certainly improved in our schools too.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Teaching kids how to balance a checkbook, teaching kids how to pursue, what does a market look like? How do you, all those things, those are incredible skills. Having a world where we have kids, they can go off to college, go off to trade school, go straight to work, do an apprenticeship, go farm, be an entrepreneur of another kind, be a small business owner. Imagine that world. That would be an exciting place. And there's a lot of, I know a lot of people in the community where I'm from who now they're in their 30s and 40s. They figured out enough about life, and they decided after working at the implement dealer that they're going to go off on their own and run their own local shop, fixing up tractors. And they've figured it out. But what if we were teaching that to kids from the beginning? How many kids could be entrepreneurs coming out of high school? I think that's a world that could exist, especially in a rural economy where there's that need.
I know that my home community, there is a guy who they have set up a center to work on that. And I know in a big town, a big suburb here in the Des Moines area, they absolutely work on, they have a session where the kids can come in and do it. So there are opportunities, there are schools trying to do it. We just have to, it's going to take us a little while. Brian, as we close, overall message of this book and this way of life to you, obviously you're always thinking about what's next, but how do you feel where we are at, and is there hope for the future?
There is hope for the future. I do feel that hope. The thing that makes me hopeful, even though there are so many things that make me afraid, are just the resilience of our farm families. I mentioned my dad and the way he stepped up at the age of 8. I think about me and my sister waking up with the sunshine to, before sunup to work with my dad, and the beauty of seeing a calf take her first breath, all that stuff is what sustains and fuels our farm families, even though farming isn't working in so many ways economically. So we've still got nearly 2 million farms, even though we've lost 70% of them. And 96% of them are family farms. So there's nearly 2 million incredibly resilient farm families still holding on, even though this is a way of life that in many ways doesn't work in this country anymore. So what if we made it work? And if we make these changes to make it work, the resilience of those families, not only mine and the stories that we tell, but so many of them across the country, the resilience of those farm families can solve a lot of problems if we let it.
Enjoy the book. I really did, Brian. Thank you so much for the time. It was a very good read, and there's a few people in my family that will be getting this for Christmas. They can't have my copy because I marked heavily in a lot of margins. There's a whole lot of integration. You talked about McDonald's. I mean, gosh, we could go on and on and on forever. Brian, thank you so very much for the time.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. People can get Land Rich Cash on Amazon or anywhere else online, bookstores nationwide. I hope anybody who picks it up just, spreads the word, keeps the conversation going about these issues. So thank you so much.
You never wanted to be on TV?
No.
Why not?
I guess, honestly, I'm just not that vain.
Yeah, because that's the only reason I did it.
Obviously.
I mean, well, what else would you do with this hair?
It needs to be seen.
I mean, I have a person.
Joan, I know. You've
Joan?
talked about her for years.
And she does great. And she's always like, is it camera ready, Paul? That's important. You didn't want that?
No.
Okay, so you do the technical things. By the way, this is Julie Knutson. She is the, I would say, master conductor, whatever, but you have a different title.
Production technician.
Meaning?
Means I technical direct, I edit, I do graphics, I do video, I direct.
And why'd you want to do that?
Well, it's fun.
And, but it wasn't your first choice.
No, I actually started out as a music major, and so logically I went from music to television.
Because of the hours, the pay,
all of the
glory?
above. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And you wanted to work summers?
Yes. No. I mean,
That's not a dig at, I said that, not
yes,
Julie.
not me.
You started technical directing hockey.
Yep.
In Minnesota?
Yes. So I went to college at Bethany Lutheran College in Mankato, and we got to cover the men's hockey broadcast at the time. They now do the women's Mankato State hockey team. They've changed their names on me. So I think it's University of Minnesota Mankato, something like that.
Yeah. But not at Wartburg?
No, not at Wartburg.
Since you mentioned it, I had to get it in.
Of course you had to.
You knew, you could see it in my eyes.
See, if I just keep saying Bethany enough times, maybe I can get a little bit closer to your Wartburg threshold.
Television is a medium that relies on a couple of things. One of them is on air, but the look is, I'm more, I can raise an eyebrow. I know how to turn. You handle the look.
We make sure it looks good, like producers, because you're a producer. Content's what you guys focus on, whereas the text, we get to make sure it all looks good.
And sounds good.
Yes.
And sounds important.
Yes.
Big shout out to Sean and Gracia for making
Absolutely.
this installment sound way better than it was when we started.
We have been having some technical difficulties with the sound, but now we don't.
To me, the greatest part of this team is the team. The technicians that you are a part of are incredible, because what I enjoy is the ability to, well, I'm trying this, do you try this? The back and forth, the brains that you all do and use, I'm amazed. Are you?
I am, and they're a great group to work with. It's really fun because we all have our strengths, and we play to each other's strengths, and we're not trying to upstage or take away or not tell anybody how to do something. We really do work pretty well together as a team.
And you are confined in tight spaces.
We
so
sure
if you
are.
can't get along sometimes, it is evident, and it makes that day seem like forever.
Yes. It helps to be friends at work and friends outside of work as well.
This segment is going to look at many of those jobs that you just mentioned, the challenges, the fineness of all these jobs, right? That's what we're going to try to do?
Look at the jobs, but like making it behind the scenes, like how does that work? Like why, like all the kind of uncovering the TV magic of it all.
Why are the commercials louder than anything else?
Why is Paul louder than anything else?
That's why I moved my mic away. I'm a professional broadcaster. I knew to yell up high.
Okay.
All right, you looking forward to this?
I'm going to have to fix that in post, I'm sure, but
How many times do you really say that?
well, producers usually say, "Oh, we'll fix that in post," and the editors are like, "Oh, of course we will." Again. But doing it right the first time is the objective. Like that's what you hope for.
So are you saying the producers are the starting pitchers and the techs are the ones, the closers, the ones
Yes.
with the save?
If we have to do another sports reference, and yes,
I only did one sports reference
today,
in this.
this time.
This time. More to come.
I'm sure there will be.
Julie Knudsen. We're looking forward to this segment that we will do at the end of the MTM podcast, so it's going to be kind of fun.
If you say so.
Okay. That's it for this installment of the MTOM podcast. I'm Paul Yeager. That's Julie Knudsen. Thanks, Julie.
You're welcome, Paul.
Next episode comes your way on a Tuesday. We're released in audio and video form. My thanks to the staff and crew at Iowa PBS. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.